Here comes the vodka. It's key. Um, that's a good question. I'm sort of formulating my answer. I think that in Hollywood, we all have a tendency to get typecast. Whether you're an actor, you're a publicist, you're a composer, you're a director. And for whatever reason, I went down a road of being Mr. Comedy. And that's wonderful because um, I've done a lot of them. I've worked with a lot of wonderful people. And comedies, family, I sort of group them all into that big category. And now, I don't know why in the last couple movies, starting with Iron Man, I guess, Iron Man 2, now Predators, and I'm going to do a film called The Double coming up, which is a thriller. Um, I guess it's the natural change of, you know, I should say we're trying to guide the career a little bit more these days so that if I have a choice, I want to explore more of these kinds of movies, be they action movies, thrillers, horror genre movies, just because it's so interesting. Um, Not that the comedies aren't, not that the romantic comedies aren't. They're great, they're fun to do, but if you, my personal opinion is if you do one of, too many of one thing, you can become very stale. And I say that, I don't say that of others, I say that of myself. And I was feeling a little staleness, and, with some great advice from my agents that I love, um, I stepped back a little bit from some of that, and that's the result. What you're seeing is Iron Man 2, thank to Jon Favreau and Marvel for inviting me to that. Fantastic experience with them. And now Predators with Robert. And it is fun. It's not that I never want to do a comedy again. I'll do one tomorrow. But it's nice being able to explore a different part of my personality, which is what I'm doing. I would go back to put a period on the end of the question, I would go back to the Passion of the Christ, that you were brilliant with helping us market in terms of the score. Um, Passion of the Christ sort of changed something in me internally, in that I was able to really explore other parts of my own personality, and that's really what started it. I would say Passion of the Christ. There was a film a year or so ago called The Stoning of
I
Soraya,
was going to mention that, and
yep.
Steve McAfee, who was one of the executive producers of Passion of the Christ, who made the introduction to Mel Gibson,
Yes,
was the executive producer of Stoning of Soraya.
right, right.
So
So anyway, it's nice to explore different areas of personality.
and your career has been such that people like working with you. They come back to you. And going back to comedy, Jon Favreau, first thing he worked with you on was X.
Right.
And that that's what led to Zathura, which led to Iron Man 2.
Right.
And Gary Marshall, he's worked on half a dozen like that.
Well, Gary's, yeah, Gary's on that list of people we're talking about that you absolutely love seeing, you absolutely love getting back in the saddle with them. Um, Gary is just unique. I'll say that. I think Gary is one of the most gracious filmmakers I've ever worked with. So, whenever the phone rings and it's Gary, I jump. You know.
He's a lovely man. He's spoken on your behalf before. Now,
True gentleman.
um, we have Rob SFX, Rob Sound Effects,
Okay.
wants to know um, how often do you receive temp tracks and how do you approach those situations? And before you answer, fans who don't know about temp tracks are music that the director will have placed in a movie before the composer writes the music a lot of times just to get the feel and just take the story along and kind of use as a model for the composer to get an idea of kind of this idea of how he wants the music to sound. And so, John.
Well, it's a good question. I get asked, we all get asked that question a lot. How do you deal with a temp track? For me, honestly, if the temp track is well done, um, I don't mind it at all. You know, and a lot of composers will disagree with me vehemently, but if the temp track to me is well done, it's properly, the pieces are properly chosen and put in the film in an elegant way, I don't mind it at all, because what it does for me is at least gives me or lays a groundwork for a discussion I can have with the director. You know, if I hear if we're in the right universe of what I think the music should be, then it's pretty easy to talk about it because the filmmaker most of the time has chosen this music very carefully over time, so that when the composer comes in, which is usually at the very end, um, if we have a temp track that they like, the filmmakers like, and I feel it's a well chosen temp track, I don't have a problem. Then I listen to it, I can reference it, and then I turn it off and try to kind of forget about it after that. Now, if it's the opposite, situation, which can be a problem, if the temp track I feel is inappropriate and not well chosen, then I have to I have to bring that up. And many times, first go around with the director, if I've worked with him or not before, I will ask him about it. For a given piece, do you like the tone of this music? Is it in the ballpark of what you like? And interestingly enough, half the time directors will say, "Oh, no, 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 I don't love that. No, that's my least favorite." So it's a discussion that you have to have, because if you kind of go blindly and go, "Well, they love this temp track," you're making the assumption they love it, and you go down that road, you could be in for big trouble. Because if you're doing something very much like the temp track, and all of a sudden you're playing a director for the first time a bunch of cues, a bunch of pieces, and they're of the temp track, he or she may hate the temp track. So it's a discussion you have to have. So I hope that answers the question. I think temp tracks are a necessary evil, let's say, because at least they will lay a groundwork for discussion. That's the way I look
Now, it's helpful for a lot of directors because they don't speak musically.
at it. Right.
Is there a particular director that you've worked with that you think is so right on when it comes to music, who understands, who even can you speak to you in musical language? Is there someone you've worked with that says,
That's a great question and a difficult one to answer, because most every director is very, very, apologetic or humble about their, knowledge of music. I mean, they don't have to know anything about music. Let me think here for a second. I think John Favreau is quite sophisticated. I think Robert Rodriguez, by the way, and Nimrod and Predators, both those guys and John Favreau are pretty darn sophisticated about what they need the music to do. And trying to choose my words, because there are many times when a director has chosen a piece of temp track for a very specific reason that I may not know about. And in the process of me playing a piece of music for the director, I will discover things about the movie that I maybe didn't even see. So guys like Robert and Nimrod and John and Gary Marshall in a little bit of a different way. Gary is very, very good with music, except he expresses it a different way. He'll say, "I don't know, I don't like flutes. They get in the way of the dialogue," and at first I'm thinking, wow, but he's right. We were doing a picture together, I think Princess Diaries, one of the early ones I did with him, and he brought up one of those things about the actual instrument. He was right. We were dealing with a scene in that regard where I think it was a scene with all women in the scene. And the particular instrument I had chosen was a flute. It was in a register that was really in the same register as the lady's dialogue and the tone, the timbre of their voice. So he was right. I had to change it to an English horn or a clarinet or something like that. And these are things, you composers out there, you may not think about at first, but, you got to pay attention to that. Every director has a certain instrument